If you show up with like fatigue and muscle weakness and kind of nerve tingling or mood disturbances, even as I was saying, like the macrocytic anemia where the red blood cells are enlarged, which usually you're not going to know that really unless your doctor flags it, probably mostly just feeling kind of tired muscle weakness, maybe, like tingling in your fingers and your feet. This shows up on a blood test, you can address it very easily.
I guess we need to just express what the heck is B12. Everybody talks about B complex. What is it? Why do we need it? Tanya.
Vitamin B12, otherwise known as cobalamin, is an essential vitamin. We can't make it, so we need to get it from food sources. And there is not a huge percentage of people who are truly deficient and like really low levels, but quite a few people who have a hard time absorbing it, or perhaps they're vegetarian and they are like following a vegetarian diet, and then they're more prone to deficiency because you can't get it from plant items. So
at all, ever?
No.
Okay.
So they're more susceptible to vitamin B12 deficiency, and it's an important vitamin. I mean, it's involved in red blood cell formation, cell metabolism, nerve function, and then infertility because it's involved in the production of DNA. So it's anytime a patient comes to see me as a vegetarian patient and they're working to get pregnant, both partners may be vegetarian, then I'll be making sure to go first testing to see what their vitamin B12 levels are like. And if they're low, then we're treating that to help them so that they're making healthy sperm and healthy eggs, because that's one factor among many when it comes to fertility. Now,
so let's just back that up for 1 second, because when a person does a profile for fertility at the doctor's office, B12 is not necessarily one that they check for as standard blood test.
And it's not on a fertility screen either. So typically you go to the doctor and they'll just, they'll look at STDs and a CBC, and maybe there's something called the MCBs, the volume of the red blood cell may be slightly on the upper end of the normal range, which means that it could be that you have a folic acid or vitamin B12 deficiency, and they're not necessarily checking that off as a test, and the cells become a little bit big and immature. So we need B12 and folic acid to make the cells a healthy size to function properly, to, process and make, DNA and in the level of the ovaries for the eggs and sperm.
Just because people love information. So let's just add that in. So when you test B12, what are the number ranges, like normal versus like it's a little deficient? When do we need to do something about it?
So different labs vary, and in terms of the ranges and even the units. So typically, if someone is showing up, in an Ontario lab and the levels are 600 to 1,000, then sometimes the doctors are saying, "Oh, you're too high in vitamin B12." Whereas most naturopathic doctors are quite satisfied with the level. It means that they're absorbing it. I remember reading at one point in the literature, it said that really there's no good test short of doing a spinal tap, and going into the spine, the fluid of the spine to check your vitamin B12 for absorption, but nobody would do that. So obviously the vitamin B12 blood levels would be more suitable because it's an easy way to check someone's levels. It's not 100% accurate though. So the levels for bare minimum though, at one lab is like 220, and I think the other lab's 240. Really anything under 300 would be deficient. And according to the Ontario OHIP cutoff, it would be like 220. So if someone's less than that, they've got, they're definitely going to be wanting to not necessarily, you could recheck to make sure they're absorbing it. But then once you've rechecked and they're absorbing it, then they would just stay on whatever, like the new nutrition routine that they're on, or the new sublingual vitamin B12 vitamin they're taking if they're not absorbing it in any other way through nutrition. So you would test it once, get the baseline, and then retest it to make sure they're absorbing it.
And the reason how long between?
So I would typically say if you're going to reassess it, 1 month, and then what's really, up to 3 months, and then you can leave in, if it's too high, let's say it's like above 1,000, then you can scale back, but I haven't seen that. If anything, it's always just a struggle to keep it up. If in those people who, let's say, don't have vitamin B12 in their diet, which we can talk about sources in a moment, or they're having absorption issues, like they have celiac disease or colitis, or perhaps they're on proton pump inhibitor medications blocking their stomach acids and they're having a hard time absorbing it. Or they're on medications like metformin in some cases. Metformin, which is for type 2 diabetes. And patients with type 2 diabetes will often experience peripheral neuropathy if their blood sugars aren't well managed because their circulation is suboptimal to their nerves in the peripheral, like so legs and hands. And so with that, you're sometimes thinking, okay, is it the sugars themselves, or is it that the medication they're on and they're not absorbing their vitamin B12? So you would look at both of those factors, and it could be like tingling or numbness in their hands and feet. So you're trying to decide where's that coming from. And sometimes it's a low vitamin B12 that's doing it, not the actual poor blood sugar management from diabetes.
Very interesting. So it's important to get it tested, and from what you're saying. And if you do test it, does it cost money?
So not in Ontario, no. But sometimes patients will run this test privately because their family doctors is not on the routine screening, so they just choose to do it privately. It's easier than making an appointment with their family doctor.
Great. So now, if you're not a vegetarian and you have low vitamin B12, what are some of the nutritional sources that you can subscribe?
So eggs are a big one, and red meat. You can even get through dairy. And besides those food options, so if you're, vegetarian, you're not eating red meat and dairy, eggs, poultry, then you would go to your next best bet would be taking it as a sublingual vitamin B12 or as an injectable. And the reason I asked you to do this episode, actually, I think it was last year, I was like, let's do this. And then we forgot. But it was because or maybe a couple of years ago, there was a 2019 study that came up, I think through Medscape, and it was highlighted the comparison of the sublingual, which is under your tongue form of vitamin B12, versus the intramuscular administration of vitamin B12, which is like an injection into the arm or into your thigh. And they were comparing the absorption in patients with vitamin B12 deficiency. It was a retrospective study, so it wasn't like a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. But there aren't very many studies out there on this topic, and it was nice to see that at the end of the study, when they reviewed the 4,281 patients, which means that they had big power, they found that there was actually better results in the outcome on their blood tests with the sublingual group. So for those people who don't like injectable medication or going to the doctor because it takes time, and they've been shown to have a low vitamin B12, they can put those vitamin B12 under the drops under the tongue, and that can overcome those challenges with the intramuscular injections. And they're saying it should be, in fact, the first line of option for patients with vitamin B12 deficiency to use the sublingual drops as a supplement instead of getting the injections. So I used to do injections, and some patients still choose to do that despite, this research. And in which case I would recommend, there's different types of vitamin B12, and the one that is better is the methylated one, so the methylcobalamin. And it's the same thing with the under the tongue drops, because they come in hydroxine, cyanocobalamin, and methylcobalamin. So the one you're looking for is the methylated one, so the methylcobalamin.
Meaning that it's automatically, your body takes it in and goes and mops it up without your body having to do much, right? It's just available to the body right away.
Yeah.
So you're saying sublingual, and really, I guess what you're telling us is that I think that you should be under the care of a healthcare practitioner that knows what they're doing. Someone like yourself.
For sure. At first, I would definitely. And then you're good to go on your way if that's all you're dealing with. But if you show up with like fatigue and muscle weakness and kind of nerve tingling or mood disturbances, even as I was saying, like the macrocytic anemia where the red blood cells are enlarged, which usually you're not going to know that really unless your doctor flags it. Probably mostly just feeling kind of tired, muscle weakness, maybe, like tingling in your fingers and your feet, and this shows up on a blood test, you can address it very easily. So with these sublingual drops, you don't have to take them every day. And the cool thing about just like vitamin B12, you can kind of do a bigger dose once a week. So you can take 5,000 micrograms under the tongue once a week to maintain your levels rather than taking 1,000 micrograms every single day or 5 days per week. And you can figure out the dose that's, helping you improve your symptoms rather than, optimizing it. So we don't really know what the optimal level on blood is. It's more like just make sure that's not too high, and then that you're meeting the minimum requirements of the low end of the range.
So what does it mean if it's too high? What's the impact on that?
It stores up in the liver, so it might not be so healthy for the liver if you're overdosing, but I think it would take a lot of work. Kind of like vitamin D. It's another one that you can take in larger doses once a week, but if you overdo it, it's hard on the liver and the kidneys. So anything in abundance is not good, right? It's not healthy.
Yes. So we did that episode with Dr. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. Dr. Kim Garby, and she's talking about how vitamin D in excess can impact fertility health as well, and maybe miscarriage.
Well, it's important to recognize the dosing, because some of these bottles, like for vitamin D as an example, each drop is 1,000 micrograms, but some of them are, the syringe, 1 ml is 1,000 micrograms. So that's a big difference. So I remember back in my practice back in the day, there was a patient who was thinking that the whole vial of 1 ml was 1,000 micrograms when each drop was. So we tested her levels, and thankfully they weren't in the toxic range yet, but they were in the upper end of that range. So it's like, okay, definitely let's, from then going forward, and this was years ago, I was like, okay, I have to make sure always to explain that difference, that it's a drop, not a dropper.
Right. Yes. Huge difference.
Yes.
And so, but going back to but most people are deficient, which can, again, we'll just reiterate. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sunshine vitamin. Vitamin B12.
But B12.
No, most people aren't deficient in vitamin B12 if they are consuming meat and fish and dairy products, eggs. So they're not deficient. Now, if they're vegetarian,
it's left untreated, though, what happens?
If the vitamin B12 deficiency gets left untreated?
Yes.
Right. So I was mentioning before, you kind of know because you're tired, perhaps, and it might show up as anemia, the macrocytic kind on blood testing, or they have the peripheral neuropathy, which is like the tingling or numbness in their fingers and peripherally or their feet. And even mood disturbances can be a thing. And they say that it's really important. I remember Medscape kind of pop up, which is, I use Medscape as one of my email communications for it. They bring back to journals, reputable journals and studies that show evidence-based medicine, both medical and holistic, which is kind of fun. And it said that for all seniors should be on vitamin B12. So that's everyone 65 plus. I don't know if I agree with that blanket statement, but it just means that if you're above the age of 65, you really should be looking at your vitamin B12, because our stomach acids do start to decline, and it's really important for cognitive function. So if you're feeling like foggy brained and tired as a young person, and perhaps you have digestive issues, or you have colitis or celiac disease, something to consider. Usually your gastroenterologist would be on top of that, but there are those scenarios where you don't even know you have those conditions. So it's something to have on the radar. And or if you're jumping into fertility and you want to make sure you can add it to your fertility screen, along with the iron and the folic acid. And if you're a vegetarian, zinc is another really important one.
Awesome. So if this was helpful for you, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can, and our podcast channel, so that we can share and disseminate this information, because this is for you, so that we can keep this going, and we want to make a difference in your life. So subscribe, share it all, and come to our myfertology.com, and we'll post all of the links to the research and other related episodes as well. Just contact us at aliveholistichealth.ca so you can speak to either one of us directly. Okay, take care, guys.